Do you love me?
Oh, I don't know, Jeff.
You're the only girl I've dated.
You might be mistaken in thinking that love would come easily to a boy like me.
You do love me, don't you?
I think so, but I'll have to think about it.
That given my beauty and intellect, life would be one long succession of kisses, cuddles, and whisperings of sweet nothings in my delicate, virile ear. But the truth is that I'm just a person like any other. And regardless of how handsome my mother insists I am, sometimes, in search of human connection, I find myself swiping mindlessly through dating apps like everybody else. What's interesting is that whilst many still hanker after the traditional romances we see in old movies, an increasing number of people seem to have abandoned notions of that special someone for the world of non-monogamy. That is, consensual relationships involving more than two adults. In fact, on dating sites such as Field, up to 60% of users are made up of couples looking for a third. Now, getting one person to tolerate my tantrums and night terrors has always proved difficult enough. But given its newfound prominence in contemporary dating, perhaps there's something to be said for non-monogamy. It's clearly working for a lot of people, so why not me as well? Before diving headfirst into multi-partner love, I wanted the opinion of someone a little more knowledgeable, so I got in touch with Rue, a lifelong non-monogamist, to see if she could shed some light on the situation.
Lovely. So when did you first sort of have your relationships always been polyamorous, or non-monogamous I should say, or was there like a specific time where you sort of got into polyamory?
So I've always kind of been a bit into non-monogamy. I'm trying to think where a time where I haven't been really. It's always been something that I've just done naturally. So I think for a lot of people, it's just something that comes from within and they just fall into it, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. And I guess it's always felt like to you, like the most natural way to form a relationship.
Yeah, totally natural. I mean, when I think about being completely monogamous, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, just can't imagine it.
It feels weird.
And how would you define yourself in terms of your relationships?
I consider my current relationship flexible, monogamous. I have had polyamorous relationships in the past. First time it was me dating a girl and she had a boyfriend and I had my boyfriend, and that was kind of separate in that way, whereas it was just me dating her. The second time, me and my fiance were dating a girl for a while, so that was quite different because obviously the first time it was just me and her, and then the second time it was kind of a triad, I think people call it. A lot of people have really like specific words for things, but I just if you I don't do whatever.
Rue certainly made it all sound pretty appealing, if a little confusing. So I decided to do a little more digging and clue myself up properly on the T's and C's of the non-monogamy world.
Now, although there's nothing new about non-monogamous relationships, the advent of dating apps, coupled with society's increased sexual liberalism, has very much brought their existence to the surface.
A 2016 survey found that out of 9,000 people, 1 in 5 had been in some form of consensual non-monogamous relationship. Moreover, we've seen a substantial increase in the number of Google searches pertaining to polyamory or open relationship, suggesting that as a society, we're growing ever more interested in relationships that go beyond traditional monogamy. Which might raise the question, what does a non-monogamous relationship look like?
Now, many of its advocates are keen to emphasise that there's no right or normal way to engage in non-monogamy, with the dynamic being decided by the people involved. As such, ways to define relationships are often vague and fluid and vary from person to person. That said, there are a few key terms that are helpful in understanding the world of multi-partner romance.
Non-monogamy is an umbrella term that refers to any type of romantic or sexual engagement that isn't shared exclusively between two people. For example, open relationships are a type of non-monogamy, in which couples are free to pursue partners separate from their own relationship. Polyamory is instead defined by many partners sharing a relationship structure. This can either be hierarchical, meaning there is a primary relationship in which others are incorporated, or it can be non-hierarchical, meaning that no particular relationship between any parties takes precedence. Finally, relationship anarchists, or RAs, reject all forms of definition and parameters, feeling that boundaries only serve to constrain the love they have to share. On learning this, I decided that I might have a better chance of understanding non-monogamy if I gave it a go myself. Despite sharing no sexual, romantic, or even platonic attraction to my producer, I asked if I might join his 10-year relationship. He said no, but I am ultimately his boss. And so after the threat of redundancy, he reneged and I moved into their flat. It was strange. Though they were undoubtedly thrilled to have me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was, in some small way, being left out. Poly relationships clearly come with their own set of complications, and I wondered how Rue managed to negotiate these.
It's interesting. I think that it's a lot more challenging because if it's just two people in a relationship, then it's pretty easy because you're just kind of a team. Whereas if there's, I mean, it's still a team if there's more than two of you, but it's more of a team effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, just adding more chefs to that kitchen, basically.
Yeah. Because I can imagine like a lot of people's probably like instant reaction to the idea of like a three-way relationship is that someone might be getting like left out or excluded, or that there might be some sort of like feelings of like envy, that might be where the sort of difficulties arise.
Yeah, I think there can be difficulties like that, and it's easy to be insecure. I think you have to do a lot of soul searching and working on yourself before you get involved in something like that, because I think you can get into it and be like, oh, this will be fine, and then realise you've got depths and depths of insecurities to kind of work through. So I mean, you can always argue that it's like that in whatever relationship you get into, but I think that having tried it all, I do think there are more complications in some ways. That doesn't make it better or worse, just different.
But that just maybe means as well that when it does work, it can be
it can be amazing,
specific
absolutely.
to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've known a lot of polyamorous couples and thruples and everything else upples that just get on amazingly. So it's really dependent on the person, I think.
Non-monogamy was certainly proving tricky to negotiate, and Rue's comments left me wondering whether I was the type of person who could ever make it work. I always had struggled with sharing on account of being Mummy's little prince, and I realised that if the relationship I'd fabricated for the purposes of this episode was going to survive, I'd have to start making a real effort.
Yeah, so I think it's going pretty well so far. You know, obviously there's always a few things to iron out in a new relationship, but I mean, the thing is, like, yeah, a lot of people would look at this relationship and think it's just a sort of idiotic and thinly veiled narrative device that's destined for failure. But I disagree. I disagree completely. You know, I've been to the shops, I've got some nice little treats, and I'm planning on surprising them. At the moment, Dill is in the gym and Faye is at work, so I'm gonna go home with my nice little bag of goodies, and I'm gonna get there before they're back, and I'm gonna cook them up a nice little meal as a surprise. Because I mean, you know, really, that is the hallmark of relationships, is keeping things fresh, and is also unfucking believable. Unbelievable. Oi, we doing steak and kisses in the park?
Oh mate, no, sorry.
Little sneaky kisses in the park.
Oh,
See Max.
No, it's not you, it's her. Getting her time to. No. Everything was fine, and then you dragged Big Dill off to the park to give him little kisses. It's kiss time, fun.
No.
See, I'm not even part of it. Come on, Faye, don't want to hear it.
Despite my best efforts, it was becoming quite clear that this relationship really wasn't working.
Filth.
For whatever reason, the loveless artificial triad I'd forced my colleague and his girlfriend into was failing to make any of us happy, and no number of chicken dinners was going to fix this. And I suppose this was the point Rue had been getting at all along. If we attempt to force ourselves and partners into frameworks that don't work for us, then surely they'll always be bound for failure. Which makes you wonder, why are so many of us raised to believe that there is only one form relationships can take? Firstly, it's important to note that whilst monogamy may be the prevailing relationship structure within Western cultures, there are many communities that practice different types of marital union. Polygyny, in which one man can marry multiple women, is commonplace across many sub-Saharan African societies, whilst polyandry, one wife, multiple husbands, is seen in communities across Asia and North Africa. Anthropologists largely understand this as a practical response to factors such as resource availability, division of labour, and patterns of inheritance, which suggests that rather than being biologically determined, the relationship structures we adhere to have a lot more to do with the organisation of our respective societies. In fact, if we're going to get down to the root of what comes naturally, then monogamy begins to fall apart pretty quickly. Just look at our closest relatives, chimps and bonobos, both of which are remarkably promiscuous. Along with that, there are various evolutionary traits that suggest our ancestors adapted to compete with multiple sexual partners.
Now, this isn't to say that monogamy is de facto wrong or evil. If it works for you, then great. But given its history, it can be no bad thing to interrogate why we're all so het up on this idea of a one true love, and accept that in modern society, that's really not for everyone.
I mean, I think most people kind of hear non-monogamy and think, oh, you're all cheating on each other, you're all just greedy, and well, you know, anyone can be any of those things. Like, it's not, I actually think it's more people feel constrained by monogamy, and I wouldn't say that cheaters cheat because they want to be like non-monogamous, because cheaters are not wanted in non-monogamous either. Like we don't want that. But I think that, no, but I think there are people who make mistakes because they feel oppressed, and then they feel like they naturally want something and then they end up slipping up. So I think that there's, you know, shades of grey when it comes to that, because I think that some people end up making mistakes because deep down they want something different.
Yeah. And I guess, like, do you think the average person would actually probably end up finding it a sort of a fulfilling, enjoyable experience?
I think it depends on the person. I think it adds more insecurity than a regular relationship, although not necessarily. I think if it's new, anything can bring in new insecurities, but I would hope that people would hear about it and then maybe consider it, because it can bring so much to someone's life.
Rue had shown it to be all so simple. Know yourself, find what works, and f the rest. Though things hadn't exactly gone to plan in my relationship, I realised that we'd still shared something special. We may not have fallen madly in love, but there was still certainly something comforting in having an older couple take you to the park and tuck you in at night. Who knows, maybe one day I'll be ready for non-monogamy. But for now, I'm content with just being someone's special little man.
The trinkets on your eyelid, elusive long past our yesterday when we were kids. We didn't know it all. He's falling off the rooftop into a trampoline. Yesterday we were kids.